this hard market per se that's going on right now, I prefer this over the easy times.
In today's episode, Courtney and I sit down with Bradley Flowers. We dive into his transition from captive to independent, what brought that transition about, the difficulties he had to navigate through, where he's at today. We also dive into industry trends that are currently going on and what Bradley is doing to set himself up for success, not only now and over the next 12 months, for the next 5, 10, 15 years. With that being said, let's start the show. Hey, welcome to the Insurance Buzz. We are your host, Michael and Courtney Weaver, and we have a special guest with us today, Bradley Flowers. What's going on, my man?
Nothing much. Just you guys are what's going on. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. We're pumped about today.
So fired up.
All right. So I've never heard this story, so I want to hear it. So you were captive for roughly 8 years, transitioned into independent in 2019. So first and foremost, what brought the transition even about?
So my podcast, we started the podcast in 2017, and we by default started me and my co-host were both captive when we started the podcast, and by default, I worked for a company that there was not really and this isn't the case with all captives, but there wasn't a culture of sharing. So we had to go outside of our company and respective companies to find guests who wanted to share. And so by default, we just defaulted to independent agents. And so through that process, we started interviewing a lot of just awesome agents, $100 million books of businesses and crazy stuff like that. And we went, one of those agents was in Connecticut. Chris Paradiso invited me and my co-host to come to his office and just do like 2 days of learning and him consulting with us and that sort of thing. So we literally flew from Alabama to Connecticut, which is a long way. And we the first day we learned all this crazy cool stuff, and we were on our way back, and Scott looked at me from across the Uber and he said, "You've got to go independent. Like, you just got to do it. You got to do it." And I had a lot of, red tape and that sort of thing. I was a corporate employee at that captive carrier. And so it was the podcast that kind of spurred it on. And for me, there were a lot of cool things I wanted to do. And unfortunately, I couldn't make those decisions. And I was like, screw it, let's go. So for me, it was more just being able to operate the way I wanted to operate. So that's sort of what brought on that move. And I'll say right away, a lot of independent agents adopt the mindset of independent is the only way. Just like a lot of captives keep the mindset of captives the only way. I think there's room for both. I think there's certain people that were meant to be an exclusive agent with a carrier. And I think that's awesome. I think there's certain people that can't breathe if they're not independent. So to each their own,
So go back to that moment in the Uber. How far from that moment to you making the decision, how much time was there in that gap?
Almost a year exactly. So it was March of 2018, and then March the 1st of 2019 was when we opened the agency. I made the decision December of that year that I was definitely going to do it. I got paid on January the 7th, and I quit on January the 8th. And 2 months later, we launched.
Heck yeah. So talk about some of the difficulties that you had to overcome in that independent space, because it's completely different than the captive model. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So fortunately, I had a huge head start because I had a year and a half of doing this podcast where we're interviewing all these great agency owners and learning a ton. So I had a massive head start because I knew a lot of things that a lot of people starting their agencies wouldn't know. But some of the difficulties, one really big one. So on the independent side, you have, the captive side, most of the carriers are direct bill, meaning the carrier bills the client pays the carrier directly. Even if they're making the payment in your office, you don't really have to touch the money, right? On the independent side, there's a lot of carriers, about half the carriers we work with are what we call agency bill, meaning the client pays me, the money goes into a trust account, similar to like a premium fund account, and then I pay the carrier. Well, you have to have like processes and mechanisms to take that payment, right? And so we opened the agency with no business plan around how we're going to take agency bill payments. And I remember I wrote a policy. This was maybe like 2 weeks in, and the customer's like, okay, I want to pay the credit card. And I called the carrier and I'm like, hey, how do I process this credit card? Like, oh, you do that. We don't do that. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't even know. So that was just one thing that was a pretty big thing that I didn't know. So it was that sort of stuff, you know, and negotiating the different contracts with the carriers. And I think just navigating all of that kind of stuff and putting it all together. I call the first 2 years of independent agency ownership, you're duct taping the agency together. You know what I mean?
So just out of curiosity, like what percentage of your business goes through that account and is not direct paid to the carrier?
Probably in terms of premium, a lot, because most commercial business is done that way.
Okay.
In terms of number of accounts, I would say it's probably 40% are done that way, which really the number of accounts that are processed that way, in my opinion, is what's more important. We actually have a vendor that we use that I'm on the advisory council of, that they handle the point of sale, the payment going to the agency, but it actually never hits the agent's account. They actually handle it. So we're outsourcing a lot of that now. So it's 10 times, even though we have more agency bill now than we did then, it's 10 times easier now than it was then.
Yeah, that's super important, because that's where I would think, like, and you hear these stories, which I never really understood this as a captive. Like, you hear these stories about independent agents may steal people's money or whatever. And I never really understood that, because I was like, well, it gets paid directly to the company. But what you're telling me right now is
that's where you went.
Oh, shit,
that was actually
crazy.
The conversation, Michael, I had in my head that day when I was talking to that carrier. I was like, that's why people mess. And I think a lot of that too, Michael, definitely not taking up for anyone that's committed fraud, because we all know of one or two agents that have done that probably belong under the jail. But I can see how somebody doesn't have great processes around that, screwing up and forgetting to pay one. 100% can see that. And to be honest with you, that was what I was most obsessed with then. And so forever, I processed those payments, even though I was I was the one that did it all, because I wanted to make sure it got done. And then we transitioned we actually hired a bookkeeper that specialized in that. So we shifted some of the liability off of us onto that company. So, but yeah, that's a big one, man. That's a big one.
Yeah, that was the first thing that I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Fraud, embezzlement.
Yeah. We always, as insurance agents, we always default to not giving our competitors the benefit of the doubt whatsoever in those cases.
Okay, back to it. So when you're first starting out and you're having to go find all of these different vendors, you're having to find a bookkeeper and things like that. Tell me how many of those contracts with people that are working within your organization, helping you run a business, do you still have? Do you still have the same bookkeeper? And how did you go and find that? Like, what is your process of actually working with somebody in business?
So it's interesting when so what most people do when they go independent is they sign up with every vendor under the sun, because they're used to being told you can only use these approved vendors, right? Well, what I did is I was really smart about it, and we were very tactical with who we brought on as a vendor those first 2 years. You know, I'm all about customer experience and technology and AI and all that stuff, and we use all that stuff now. But when we first started, it was bare bones what we needed to run the agency. My co-host, Scott, when he went independent from Nationwide, he did the opposite. He signed up with every vendor under the sun, but it was as a way to test to see who was the better option. So I think you can go one of two ways, but if you go the second way, you just have to be willing to dump something that doesn't work. And so many agents, what they do, one of the biggest learning curves, I think, from captive to independent is on the captive side, all the systems are connected. You put the customer information in one place and it's going to appear everywhere else. You may not even have to put it in there. You know what I mean? On the independent side, it's not necessarily the case. So I try to encourage people when it comes to vendors, make sure they're not trading off one problem for another. Like, yeah, we have this solution here. This is going to make this thing way better, but now all of a sudden it adds another step in the process because I have to transfer this customer info over to this program, So I try to encourage people to, if they have to use multiple pieces of tech, make sure the tech talks to each other. Otherwise, you're playing business whack-a-mole. You're knocking this mole down, another one's popping up.
So you're asking that question when you're screening for vendors is 100%. Tell me how this talks to all of these other programs.
Absolutely.
So when you went bare bones, what were the things that right away you're like, okay, these are the ones that I want?
We used a agency management system, which is, digital filing cabinet. That's where the customer account lives, right? That's where the policy is and all that kind of stuff, files, that sort of thing. We used an e-signature program. You got to have that. And we used a phone system. That was it. That was our tech stack, so to speak. The only thing I would have done differently is I would have added a CRM on top of that. The agency management, there's really no agency management system that has the functionality of a CRM as far as like automations and customer communications and, your pipeline of all your deals. There's not an agency management system that really has that. So I would have added a CRM to that. And that was it. That was, we started with a very, very small amount of money in the bank. My 2-week payroll now is more than the amount of money I started with. I'm very proud of that. And I don't recommend it for anybody, but that's what we did. It was just like, hey, we're burning the ships and this is either going to work or it's not. And we went from that to profitable in 10 months just on those 3 systems.
We get it, man. When we started, we had $5,000 to our freaking name. Like,
yeah,
burn the ships. Let's roll, baby. Back against the wall. No options left.
It was a running joke because it was like, if this doesn't work, who's taking these 2 in and their animals? Like,
yeah,
like where are they moving? And then it was we started agency 2 months after we got married. So they're like, wow, this is a double whammy. They're either going to be divorced or broke or homeless.
Well, we were already broke. But.
Well, I'll tell you one advantage you guys had that I had as well is that you had, and my spouse does not and did not work with me, but she completely understood what I was going through. Having that spousal buy-in is huge, or partner buy-in. I see I talk to a lot of agency owners, and a lot of times a common denominator with the ones who aren't doing well or aren't in a good place is they don't have that spousal buy-in and support. It's freaking huge.
I would agree. And I think it's really tough. Just like you were just saying, we were lucky because we were working together. You and your wife are in the same industry, so you can understand. I think sometimes spouses just don't, it may not even be, they just don't understand what's going on. And then the communication isn't there to help understand. Exactly. So that can get really tough. And yeah, I mean, as well as I do, divorce rates, separation rates in our industry are extremely high. I mean, I think out of all the people I went to internship with, which would have been like 25, over 50% of them separated within the first 12 months of agency. Like it was a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because you and your spouse have a wonderful relationship and you're in the same industry. What have you done to set up? I mean, everyone talks about communication, but tell me what great communication looks like for you guys.
I don't want to say that we're perfect at it because everybody can improve somewhere. For us, we typically don't talk business after 5:00. And then added to that, if someone does want to talk business, the other person or someone had a bad day. I had 2 Wednesdays ago, I got home and she was like, "You okay? You seem off." It's like, I just had a really bad day. You want to talk about it? No, I don't want to talk about it. And so giving me that space to kind of just be in a bubble for an hour and just kind of let it, hey, look, I'm going to cook dinner and that's how I'm going to get this out of my system. You know what I mean? But then the flip side of, hey, okay, yeah, I do want you to listen. And then having one of the most important tips I can give anybody as it relates to problems in general, but especially business problems, and you're unloading on that spouse. Is this a problem you want me to solve, or you just want me to listen to you? That's like one of the most important questions you can ask, because sometimes they just really want you to like be a sounding board, and they don't want advice. They don't want you to tell them how to fix it. It's just like, I got to get, and a lot of times getting that off your chest, you'll come up with the problem while you're doing it. You know what I mean? And then vice versa. So it's really, that is what I would say. But also, so we're in the middle of an acquisition. We're acquiring an agency, and we are, it's a large undertaking. And so there's going to be some afternoons and some evenings where I'm going to have to do things that take me out of my routine or take me away from home. But having a spouse that completely understands, oh, this is actually a big deal. You know what I mean?
Yep. So how did you all come up with like the 5 p.m. rule? So not talking business after 5 p.m. So I'd love to just start there real fast.
I don't think we ever had a conscious decision about it, a conscious conversation. I think it's something that just sort of happened over time. You know what I mean? I'm the type of person that once I get out of work mode, I can't go back. Like I will sit there and watch the phone ring after 5 o'clock. If somebody's calling me, needs something, unless it's an emergency, it's an employee or something like that. I don't know that we ever had a conversation about that. It just kind of happened,
Was she already in insurance? Like, were you both already in insurance before you met?
Yeah. So she's been in the industry since she was 16 or 17. And I got in when I was 21 or 22, and she was in it long before me. And then we met. I was at the captive company. She was opening up an office next door, sent me a direct message. Hey, I'm your new competitor. I'm the one here to kick your butt, that sort of thing. And I was like, well, she's pretty. And then also like, I need to be friendly because maybe she'll at least feel a little bad when she takes my customers. So we went to lunch, and like one thing led to the other. And I'm always that kind of person. Like I'm always the type of person that defaults to, hey, I would rather befriend my competition.
Yeah.
I think it serves everybody much better if there's some sort of relationship there. So I would have asked her to lunch even if she was a dude. You know what I mean? There's no like ulterior motive there, really.
Okay.
I'm waiting because somebody slides into your DM. You take them to lunch, and then you're like, "That's the end of the story." And then we rode off into the sunset. Happily ever after.
Well, so all right, so I'll keep going. So then, we went to lunch again. I went to lunch the first time, and it was purely 98% platonic. Me just taking a competitor to lunch or going to lunch with a competitor, and she walked into the room and completely blew me away. I was like, wow, like I was attracted, to say the least, in a good way, And so we went to lunch again, and kind of went down the road of me trying to convince her to date me. And it turned into this has turned into a therapy session. She was like, I don't know, we're competitors. What happens if we break up? And then there's real hatred there and that sort of thing. And my pitch was, I said, and this actually comes right back in the conversation. How would you like to come home from work with a bad day, and you want to talk to your boyfriend, husband, fiance, whatever, and you don't have to spend 15 minutes giving context around what uninsured motorist is? The person you're coming home to every day understands exactly, to the umpteenth degree, exactly what you're going through. And that was it, man. Okay, let's date. Let's date, let's
I've
make
never
it
heard of that.
official.
I've never heard of that pickup line, but man.
I know. Now everyone in here is like sending out PNC exams to all of the future. This is the new. Oh my gosh! Should we make this an app? Is this a dating?
That's a hell of a pickup line.
Oh my gosh!
And what was funny is we kept it on the down low, not because we were competitors, but because we were both heavily involved in the Chamber of Commerce, and it was just we just decided to keep it on the down low, and we were actually engaged before anybody knew we were dating. Yeah. So like when we got engaged, that's when people found out we dated, which was like 8 or 9 months later. So it was like, and I remember we were at a chamber function the week later, and we were sitting at a table, and I've got a good buddy, George Burroughs. He's got this like kind of thick New York accent, and he leaned over. He's like, "You guys are the talk of the town."
Shoot. So what's that? So what is that dynamic like? So husband, wife, but you run. So one captive, one independent. What's that dynamic like?
Completely normal. I mean, we don't know anything different. You know what I mean? But I think people would be shocked at how little we talk about minute business things that are going on. I have stuff going on in my company that she doesn't know about, not because I'm keeping it, just because it doesn't come up. And then she has things going on I don't know about. You know what I mean? It's as normal as it can be. You know what I mean?
It sounds like you guys have really good, like, healthy boundaries. Like work is work, life is life.
Yeah.
I mean, if they dated for 9 months without anyone knowing, like, you guys know how to keep things sacred. You know how to keep things in a little box.
I think we're both very private when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like, we're building a house right now, and people are starting, like, there was a guy in my office that's like, "Man, I saw your house. It's coming along." It's kind of on like a well-trafficked road. And I was like, I don't like that people know that that's my house. You know what I mean? Like, we're both just very, like, neither one of us are overly braggy. We're just very, like, to ourselves and that sort of thing.
For sure. All right, let's transition.
I could talk about this all day.
I know we could. I know
there are so many.
I could too.
It's not just a romantic partnership. There are so many people that are in business in partnership together. And that is an interesting dynamic. There's a lot that goes into roles, responsibilities, communication, and knowing each other's working style and what sets somebody off. So I could.
We don't have to transition.
No, I want to transition because you brought up the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm curious if that is still something that you do as one of your marketing strategies, as acquiring business, or like, where's your focus right now, especially with this market?
Yeah. So she's still heavily involved in the chamber. I'm a member and that sort of thing. I'm not quite as involved or nearly as involved as I used to be. Where we are, we're growing, we're making this acquisition, and my focus is more, I'm the guy that sends my people to chamber stuff. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way. I definitely think you can get business from the chamber and that sort of thing. But I look at the chamber as the same way I look at like BNI, and I look at other networking type groups that in the beginning, when nobody knows you, it's literally the best thing you can do, especially if you want to get known in a community. But I think over time, you get to a point to where it's like diminishing returns, where it actually costs you more time to be at that thing than it did. And you're better off maybe not going to a couple of meetings, and then you show up and everybody's like, "Oh, Bradley's here." You know what I mean? It makes more, you become the billboard that's across the street from your house. If I put a billboard across the street from your house, you're going to really notice it the first day. And the next day, you're going to notice a little less and a little less and a little less. And eventually, you're not going to see it. And so that's how I look at stuff like that. So what we do is, I don't do a ton of network anymore, but we'll send our people, we'll, deploy our people out, whether there's a networking function or something like that. And then I'll show up every now and then. But I definitely think it's a business strategy that can be used effectively. Where we are now and where I am, so our agency, and a lot of agencies say this, and so I almost hate saying it, but when we started, we were heavily based on referrals. Worked with a lot of mortgage lenders, worked with a lot of captive agents, and we were about as close to referral based as you could possibly get. And we still do that. We're really good at that. We are transitioning to more outbound sales, not replacing the referrals, but adding to, if that makes sense. And so just because it's more, I feel like it's more in your hands. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things you can't control when it comes to referrals. One being that person has to send you that referral, whereas outbound sales, it's like, it's a volume play, So we're transitioning to more outbound cold calling, outbound drip campaigns, which are working very well, email drips and that sort of thing. more centered around commercial, and then there's a mergers and acquisition arm to that, where we're basically right now trying to acquire as many other independent agencies as we can that make sense. Right now we've got, and that's a lot of my time is that M&A. Right now we've got an agency under contract that's supposed to close at the end of the year. We've got another offer out on an agency in Georgia that we're supposed to hear back from today or tomorrow. Another one we're pre-LOI on, but we're doing due diligence on. And I think there's a lot of folks that have started agencies in the last 10 years. Times have never been tougher than they are right now. And they're just like, hey, I'm ready to peace out. You know what I mean?
All right. You just went into a lot. I feel like you just opened a can of worms that I want to dive into. All right. So talking about the transition from going almost 100% referrals to outbound calling. All right. What does that, number one, how did your team, react to that? Because I know sometimes when you can go from 100% referral, all the leads are coming in, to now we need to actually prospect and be intentional with our prospecting and lead gen. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Like, did you have to hire a new team? Was the current team receptive to it? What did that look like?
Yeah. So our current team they're still doing a lot of referrals and that sort of thing. Where we're transitioning that is with newer people. So instead, whereas a couple of years ago, it was, hey, you're a new producer here at Portal, we're going to help you build up your referral sources. Now we're still doing that, but now it's, hey, I also need you to make 80 calls a day, or send so many emails, or reach out to contacts, that sort of thing. Along with, we've hired 2 outbound dialers whose sole job is to cold call businesses and, oh yeah, you're interested, live transfer. So we basically built our own live transfer lead company. It's just we're doing it essentially, and we're not nearly as good as other people. But one of those dialers is in the Philippines. The other one is here in the U.S. And we're trying to build out our team that way. And so not necessarily disrupt the way our current team's doing business, but adding other people on who are more apt to do that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you said it's focused, you're mainly doing it on the commercial side. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just a little easier. There's more info out there about businesses than there are individuals. We can do a lot of research on certain company sizes and that sort of thing. One of our niches, there's a hefty amount of data on all of those companies across the United States. So we can easily pull lists and that sort of thing. And then also the premium's bigger. So, if we write 10 personal lines accounts, that's 20,000 in premium. We can write one commercial account that's 50. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's I am a huge fan of outbound dialing. I'm not a psycho. It's not like I like cold calling, but I do love how you can do it, and then you can see an immediate win, immediate impact from doing it, and you're in complete control of your own success, not waiting for people just to send you leads. So I love that that's a portion of your marketing plan. Well,
I think, and I did a LinkedIn post on this the other day, I think prospecting is the most important part of sales, because somebody who's a bad salesperson, as long as they're decent at prospecting, i.e. willing to make the dials or make the calls, that sort of thing, the math is going to work itself out. And then over time, you're going to get better by repetition. So it's a win-win. They just have to get over that hump of being scared to interrupt somebody's day. You know what I mean? Yep. And the beautiful thing, and I tell this to people when I recruit them, so I'm on the bottom floor of an 8-story building. We have a rooftop patio up there. You can see the whole city. I'll take them up there and I'll say, hey, every building you see is insured. Every car you see is insured. Every truck you see is insured. Everybody you come into contact with today, as long as they are not homeless, is going to buy insurance this year. It's your job to figure out, how do I deliver that message to them that resonates with them in a way that gets their attention just enough so that they talk to us.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And for anyone listening right now, if you don't want to learn through trial and error, you should give me a call. We'll speed up that process. You'll learn how to become a sales professional a lot sooner, so you can take advantage of all the prospecting that you're doing. So
yeah, exactly. Don't call me, call Michael for sure. I would call Michael.
So right now, so you're going through some transitions with adding to, I assume, set yourself up for success for the future. So talk a little bit. That's what I wanted to dive into a little bit, is the trends you're seeing in the industry and what you're currently doing to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success, just not over the next 12 months, but for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I think, in terms of the acquisition stuff, I like to look at people who are much more successful than me and figure out, okay, how did they get there? What did they do to get there? And if you look at the top 10 independent agencies in the country in terms of premium size, all of them got there by M&A. And so it's like, okay, why aren't we doing what they're doing? And then we could also combine our sales skills and grow organically. And it's just adding gasoline to the fire. And part of, I think, what is making it so difficult now on people, on agents, and why there's a lot of people selling, and this speaks to your question about the trends, is, COVID happened and it forced everybody who was not technologically advanced to adopt technology. And people did, but then a lot of people have gone back. And I think those are the people that are struggling in terms of, hey, yeah, we have to use this technology because our people have to work from home and yada, yada, yada. Well, now it's like things are back to normal per se, although I wouldn't call this normal, but things are, people can come in the office and that sort of thing. And okay, we're not using this piece of technology anymore. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And like, for example, my director of operations here, office manager Kenneth, was out of the office 3 weeks ago for a week. And we had this process we had to put in place for a specific function that he does while he was out. Okay. He came back and I was like, hey, that process we put in place for that thing? He's like, yeah. I was like, we're going to keep doing it that way. You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of agencies aren't adapting as fast as they need to, whether it be to AI or technology or that sort of thing. And that's created an opportunity for people who are willing to be adaptive with technology to accelerate their growth. And, specifically in the acquisition realm, what we look for is we look for value adds. We look for agencies that we think maybe are run a little bit antiquated, or maybe there's an opportunity with some cross sales or that sort of thing. And we're going to underwrite it to the point that it's like, okay, we know if we don't improve it at all, everything's good, but we know we're going to come in and accelerate and just plug our processes in. Like there's an agency now we're looking at that's a large agency that has not grown like an agency of this size should with this many people, and they're not using a CRM. And I'm like, okay, if we absorb that agency, merge with that agency, and we do nothing else but put a CRM in place that lets all these producers have their leads in front of them, because you guys are in sales training. If your leads are in front of you, you're more apt to work them.
Oh, yeah.
If we don't do anything else but that, I guarantee you new business is going to inch up. So those are just some things. But at the same time, I don't have a crystal ball either. Unfortunately, I'm not Lloyd's of London or a reinsurer or anything like that. So who knows where things are going. But that's kind of what I'm seeing and where our growth strategy is. And, I think that this hard market per se that's going on right now, I prefer this over the easy times, because it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys are golfers by any chance, but Brooks Koepka, one of the top golfers in the world, won the PGA Championship this year, said he likes the major championships because it eliminates 2/3 of the field because they don't have the mental game to take it. And so, like when we first opened Portal, we'd be competing on an account. We always try to get competitor deck pages. Man, we'd be up against 30 agencies. Like it was insane. It was just like a price war. It was whoever got back first. Well, now it's like 2. And part of that is because agencies are having to redeploy resources from sales to retention.
Where are you focused right now when you're going through all these mergers and acquisition? Where are you focused hiring? Are you focused more on service? Are you focused more on sales? What does that look like for you internally?
It depends. I think by default, I'm always hiring salespeople. Like I'll be down to my last dollar and a salesperson comes in. Not that that's ever happened, but if I am down to my last dollar and a salesperson comes in the door and says, "Hey, I want to sell," I'm going to figure out a way to hire them. Mm-hmm. I think by default with an acquisition, service is more important just because you want to make sure there's no client disruption. You know what I mean? And then honestly, like my favorite thing to do is to get their P&L and go through the P&L and eliminate all the crap they don't need that they're paying for. Mm. And then I think there's agencies that I'm not a proponent of the digital agency, no office, only work from home kind of thing. But there's a lot of agencies that, like there was one agency recent, it was like a year ago, that was not profitable. Small agency, couple million in premium, they weren't profitable. And I went through their P&L and redlined all the expenses associated with the office and flipped it, and they were profitable. And I'm like, guys, you don't need to be selling. You just need to get rid of your office. Like get rid of your office till you're double the size you are now and then open an office up. You know what I mean? Yep. So it's just looking at things like that. Everyone's different. And by the way, I'm not some like oracle of acquisitions or anything like that. I'm very new to this, but I've looked at no less than probably 50 agencies for sale in the last 2 years. So you start spotting trends in areas you think you can help people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So out of curiosity, out of those 50 that were for sale, how many of them would you yourself, regardless if you pursued them or not, considered like, okay, I think this would be a good acquisition?
Probably all but 5. Maybe.
Okay. That's really high.
But some of those I missed out on because I was too slow. Some of them got a ridiculously high offer. And, I had one last year that made it all the way down to closing and the seller backed out for personal reasons. The ones that I've passed on were those 2 in particular that are in my head right now. One was ran so well, there was no room for improvement. It was ran so well that the guy was asking top dollar and he deserved top dollar. It was a great town. If I said the name of the town right now, everybody here would be like, "Ooh, yeah, it's a good town." And it was just ran so well. I was like, man, this thing's only going to go down if I take it over because it's run so well. I can't run it any better than it is now. And I also can't pay you what you're asking. The other one, from a cash flow, I just turned down actually 2 weeks ago. From a cash flow perspective, was awesome, but their loss ratio with one particular large carrier was out of whack. It was like 200%. And we have a really good loss ratio with this carrier. So A, I don't want to muck that up. And then B, a bad loss ratio is a little bit indicative of the type of customers you're writing. So,
yep. No. Well, Bradley, this has been awesome, man. If somebody wanted to follow you, connect with you, support you, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
Just go to, any social platform whatsoever, search Bradley Flowers. My 3 big ones are Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And hit me up. Happy to chat.
And since you're already in your ears listening right now, if you search the Insurance Guys podcast, you can listen to Bradley and Scott. Every week they're going to get on. There's going to be a long intro that is very hyped up that nobody can do justice like Scott can. It is an incredible podcast.
Sometimes I'll listen to the podcast to see how long it is before I get to speak. Scott is a genius at those intros, and nobody can do it like him. But he's he brings a little bit of WWE to the insurance industry. And so I think he's a large part of why the podcast is successful.
Yeah, man.
It's so fun. And the intro, I'm like, okay, I don't know if he has a part-time job as an announcer and like college football, WWE, but he hired. He is
He
hired.
definitely should. He should. What he should do is he should do like Cameo, where he does those intros for people and charge like $30 to do those intros. And I don't know why the guy is not famous on TikTok. Well, I do know why. It's because he sends me all these crazy videos like all day long. He'll send crazy videos. And I'm like, dude, you need to be posting these on TikTok. Like you will legitimately be famous. His time. So one thing people don't know about Scott is he studies comedians. Like his hobby is like watching comedians. And so he picks up on that timing and stuff.
Ah.
Yeah.
He's got
I can
it.
see that, Scott.
Oh,
he crushed
yeah,
it. Yeah. When he did our intro, I was like, shit, this guy is on fire.
And by the way, it's not rehearsed. There's no rehearsed. It's just, he's got your bio and he just goes.
Yeah.
And we told the story recently on another podcast. We never had a conversation about this crazy intro. Like we literally started recording the first time and we get in this little office, which happens to be where my office is now is actually where the original podcast studio is. It was another tenant then. And we're in this little room and he just starts yelling. And I'm like, I don't remember discussing this, but I'm cool with it.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
All right. I do have one last question because when he introduced you on the Insurance Guys podcast when we were on there, I think he introduced you as like being 6'4". Are you really 6'4", Bradley?
I'm not. No.
Okay.
I'm not.
I've been meaning to ask you that since he did that intro. I'm like,
where did that come from?
Came to my mind.
6'4". He's 6'4".
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The first insurance conference I went to was Gary Vaynerchuk's Agent 2021. And it was right after the podcast really started getting legs. And I remember I got there and had a great, couple days. And then I left and I was on the flight back. And I'm the guy that always buys the airplane Wi-Fi. And I'm on my phone and I've got like all these DMs of people like, man, I missed you. I kept looking for this 6'4" guy. And I didn't realize you were 5'8". I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the part of the joke, So I don't know where it came from. He won't tell me, but it stuck. So.
I like it, man.
That is so good.
Shoot. All right. Bradley, thank you. For all of those of you that are listening, thank you so much for your time. As always, time truly is the most valuable, important asset that we all have. We appreciate you spending time with us today. Would love your feedback on the episode today. Make sure you text us. Other than that, go out and make it great.